Okay, hi everyone. So yes, we are going to talk about testing again. Are you excited? Yeah, I'm excited because last time I talked about component testing also, but with Vitest. This time I'm going to tell about a different aspect, whether we really need component unit testing or not, or do we, or both. Okay, but first and foremost, Maya, I'm a senior software engineer at Microsoft. I'm working in the group called Industrial AI, which we are leveraging different technologies in AI and LLM, such as OpenAI, search cognitive search, in order to offer the business solution to industry specific. There's a lot of fun, I know, but also it's a lot of hype. Now, anyway, I love front end. I've been working with the front end and web for more than 10 years. And I also do book writing. Yes, I just have a book on Learning Vue just released, and you are welcome to check it out on Amazon or on the O'Reilly Media portal. I also you can also follow me on Maya Shavin in Twitter or X or LinkedIn, or check out my website at mayashavin.com. I'm a Cloudinary ambassador. Also, I'm a founder of Vue.js Israel community for the Vue community in Israel. And I also a Google developer expert in the web technologies. That's enough about myself. Let's go about testing. Okay, so testing, we only have the pyramid, the legend pyramid of three different layers of testing, right? So we have unit testing, which is the more isolated unit piece of code that you can test independently. Integration is the one layer of both unit testing, where we do all the tests that simulate the data flow and the connection between different pieces of code. And then lastly is end-to-end tests, where we actually simulate the whole flow from end to end, from backend to front end with actual API, no more, nothing, just to simulate the actual user step-by-step experience and see it does work as we expected or not. Great, right? Now here come the questions. Where should component testing belong? We saw the pyramid. We hear about component testing a lot. Where is component testing belong here? Is it unit test? Is it supposed to be integration test, or maybe end-to-end test? Well, according to Process Stack and according to Copilot, component testing is a concept of testing individual component of any applications. It can be the functional and usability of each component are validated separately without integration with other components and without dependency in other components. It's very isolated, right? You can call it unit testing or module testing. But this is we talk about component testing, but the word component is very generic. In UI, we think it's the UI component, but in backend, it also have component. It's just a different concept. It's also a piece of code. So when we talk about component testing in Vue, in React, or anything, we're talking about front-end component testing. So what exactly front-end component testing? Well, according to Copilot for Bing, or you can call it ChatGPT, well, front-end component testing is for validates the GUI element that function as expected. So for that, we have several criteria we are going to look at. One, input and output. What is the props, whether the issue can happen with prop, whether the component render according to prop correctly, the event emitted from this from this component, whether slot, style, class, lifecycle hooks, visual, how it looks, interaction with other components and other children component as it should be, which means you don't mock the children component. You render at the whole and see whether it rendered correctly or not and behave correctly or not. So in my previous talk, we're talking about component testing can be mocked, can be isolated really by mocking anything that comes from outside, just so we can test the component itself. In fact, we can also not mock and make sure that we can test because it's more reliable in testing that way. So with this, I come down to two things. For component testing, we have two different categories. Component testing in small and component testing in large. When we talk about component testing in large, it means that it's the component itself we have to validate it with the help of other components. It can be that one of the data inside using in that component state is relying on the other component to be updated, or we're using the output of this component to validate other component input. This is called component testing in large. In other way, we can call it component testing in integration testing. The other smaller scale is component testing in small, which let me know everything is isolated. The individual component is very, very low level. And this to make sure that the individual component here works as expected, just like we test a composable standalone. Okay, so to make it short, we have component testing can be unit test, can be integration test, right? Now here comes the question, where this component testing fall into? Back to our questions. So in this, based on these definitions, the component testing actually fall in right in the middle between integration and unit test. Where it can be a bit more lean toward to unit test, can be lean towards to integration test. So next question, how are we going to decide whether we're going to do unit test for component, or should we do an integration test for component, or should we do both? Well, test is cheap, but it's not cheap. You don't want to make a lot of tests and make your system run very slow and wait forever for your PR to finish before you can merge or for production. And what we can use, what technology we can use for each different use case. So let's take a look on our demo app for today. So in this demo app, again, pizza. Oh, I love pizza. So in this demo, we're going to look at a store called Pizza Store, which it have. Okay, guys. So the demo app we're going to look today is the pizza app. So this is the pizza store. We can add to cart, we can remove from cart, we can view how many items in cart. We can search for specific pizza and get a filter list. Okay, that's it. That's the demo app for today. So for the testing methods we're going to use here, we're going to use Vitest. We're going to do the comparison between Vitest with Vue Test Utils and Playwright. The reason I don't do more than that is because first of all, these two are my favorite combinations for testing in Vue, and secondly, we don't have enough time. And some of them are pretty similar. So both of them offer some sort of component testing and some scale. So for Vitest and Vue Test Utils, you need to install Vitest, Vue Test Utils package, and JS DOM so that we can have a set of DOM on like a mimicking of browser API. So we can pretend like we can kind of render the component like in the DOM. Okay. And for Playwright, we're going to use Playwright for browser. We're going to install Playwright for browser so that it will install all the browser drivers needed for running Playwright. Playwright /test. So component testing Vue package.
Really quick, Maya, you're breaking up again a bit. Could you maybe turn off your camera to see if we can at least keep you for audio? Thank you.
Let's
Hopefully that will help.
One second. Let me just open the door, so maybe it will help.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Okay, now it's better. I always have problem with the internet connection.
Hopefully.
Yeah, that's so weird. And okay, so just assume that you can see my face. I'm really sorry. I really want you to see my face, but too bad. Anyway, so we have to install the Playwright Experiment City View package because this is the package for component testing experimental. They have been experimental since last year. I have no idea when they're going to get out of experimental, but hey, we got what we got the test and we got to tell them is it good or not, right? Okay, so next, we're going to look at the demo app. In this demo app have several components. The card component, the search component, the gallery component, the pizza card component that will help the gallery to render the list of pizza. And all of these components kind of connecting one each in one to each of one another and using different composable, which is use card, use search, or use pizza in order to maintain the local state. In this demo app, I'm not using Pinia for any reason because I want to make sure that I can understand it without using Pinia for component testing. We're not going to look on the component, we only look two. So in this case, we're going to look, the first component is card component. So as you can see, the card component display a list of cards, allow you to toggle the card visibility, allow you to remove one card item or every on the card item. It also display whether or not there's anything in the card. And the data we use inside this card component are from the composable used card, and it's not from prompt. Okay, so we can consider it's the external data management. Okay, so based on these features, we're going to have three test cases. You look at here, this is the sample, what you call sample implementation of the card component. And we have three test cases for this implementation. Toggle the display the message accordingly according to with or without items. And we're going to trigger the remove actions to make sure that actions is triggered and emitted accordingly. Okay, so that is called the demo. Since we don't have much time, I won't do a live demo coding. I'll just go through with you how we do it. So for Vitest, we have the test folder. And in the test folder, we have the first test called card aspect. You can name it card of test. It's also okay. So in this one, we have already written different definition of different tests. So we can see here that we already have on the selector that needed for the query selector for the element on in the DOM. Okay, and so for the first test, toggle display, what we do here is we also mount the card from using Vue Test Utils mount function. And then we find the toggle button. We make sure that we assert that the card, the list of the item, the sections, the drop down section is not visible by using invisible functions from Vue Test Utils. And then we trigger, we click on the button, okay? We wait for it to finish clicking, and then we go into check the style of the card selector to be not display none. The reason why I'm not using invisible to be true here is because there's a bug in Vue Test Utils that invisible cannot, for some reason it doesn't, couldn't find that if you don't have a style here, it means it's visible. Okay, so anyway, so this is the first test, easy, right? The second test is render no card item. This is also pretty straightforward. So what we do is we also do the same thing. We got the toggle button. We checked that the card have the name card 0 because we wanted to display the value of the total item in card. And this is no item, so it had to be 0. And then we found the first parameter, first paragraph, and make sure that it have the text no item in card. Otherwise, which means we do something wrong with our code. So this is the second test suit. We go on test scenario. The third scenario is we're going to do the render card item. So this is more interesting. For this render card item, because we're using the use card, a use card is not controlled by the card itself. So in this one, we need to mock. So for that, first, we're going to inherit. We're going to inherit the use card, the whole file, everything in the file as the card hooks. Okay, and then we use v.spyon, and we spy on the card hook, which the function use card. Okay, and then for after every each run, we're going to clear the use card spy so that it will not affect the next test. Okay, and now what we do is we're going to mock the return value once, where the item had to be returned with card items. And we also kind of put in some mock function here that we don't really care. And also the total is the length of the card. Okay. And similarly, we also do looking for the toggle button, and we make sure that the text in the toggle button have to be accordingly to the number of card item. We trigger the click, and then we find the first paragraph, and this time it has to contain in your cart and not no item in your cart anymore. And we also find the list items inside the cart list, and see that the length have to be the same with the length of the card item. If you want, you can also assert whether the first item display according to what you want it to display with the total quantity and the price, and then get the total cost for a certain item. But that's not a must. But it's the good things to consider. And similarly, the last two tests for remove and remove on. So for remove per item, what we care about here is we're going to make sure that we have a mock on remove functions. And then we find the first item, and we going to find the remove button, and we trigger click on that item. And then we assert whether the mock we passed is called or not, and has to be called with the ID of the item at the first place. Okay. And similarly, the last one for the remove on, we also do mock. We also mock with remove on, but this time we assert it to the clear functions because that's what we care. And we'll find the remove on button, and we trigger the click, and we expect it to be called. That's it. We just covered the unit test for the card component with mocks. How about Playwright component testing? With Playwright, we also do have two simple tests. Okay. The first test, we also do the same thing. You import the test and expect from the experiment package, and you can also only come with the malfunctions that from the test function here, text of input object here. So we can mount the component, and then we can expect the component to contain the card, and then we can expect that the no item in card will not be visible until you click on the button, the toggle button. And then after you click it, you expect that now the component should display the no item in card. Very simple. The next problem is, how are we going to test the case where it should display with item? The item here comes from external composable or hooks, which also means that you need to find a way to mock it or find a way to control it. The mocking or the modifier like this doesn't work, okay? Because it's not in the context. The second thing is just running card like this, because it's not external. So Playwright doesn't provide any mocking, because it also Playwright is the end-to-end testing framework. End-to-end testing framework not supposed to let you mock anything except for the API HTTP request. And you can only mock Pinia store. But my card is not using Pinia. I'm using my own store. So I cannot mock it. And which means this test, I cannot do anything. If I want to do this test, I need to find a component, or I need to make a component that for testing, that component will trigger the use card to update the card items, and then I can test the actual render of the card component. Seems pretty much complex, right? So with that, come down to the comparison here. For Vitest with Test Utils, we can mock the use card, the test case, according to what we want to test, the scenario. But we cannot we cannot see the actual UI rendering, which means we cannot see whether the card display correctly, whether when you click on it, it really drop down, not going on top and not going to the left, not going to the right. For Playwright, we can't mock use card unless it's a HTTP request on a Pinia or a Pinia store, which is neither way in our situation here. We can test the UI in the different browser, which means we can run the test and we can see the card display, and then we can see the drop-down display on the screen, and we can see that whether what we want whether the styling, the position is correct or not for that specific component. And lastly, the biggest problem with component testing with Playwright is that we cannot test on the case independently without workaround. In such case, we can only test card fully if we put it together with, let's say, a piece of card, because piece of card have a button that can trigger adding an item to cart. Okay, so should we only test the card in unit test, or should we just not test the card in the whole, either with Vitest or with Playwright for component testing, but we can just test in the integration test with another component? Because either way, if you look at this, the use card is actually just the UI that display whatever state of the card. So the card component is the UI of this to display whatever state of use card cook, right? So if you kind of test use card composable correctly, the card component itself should be fine, because you can, if you look at the test of use card composable, it's pretty similar with the unit test we just done with Vitest. So is that good to do kind of repeated? Well, we will look at it later. Now we'll move to the next component. It's called the search component. Okay, this is another interesting component that we can look into. So this search component have an input, receive a text, and return and emit the list of items. So I receive a text at the search term and the list of items at the initial items that it will do the filter on. It's synchronized with the URL. That's the interesting one. It's synchronized with the URL search param, which means whatever you change in the input, the URL will get updated with the search param above. It will emit the filter items back up, so that, let's say, a parent can take that and update on the screens. And it also controls its own state using user short with already assumed that it's been tested independently. Okay, so that comes to 3 test suite. And again, if you look at the screen here, you can see that we have an example of how we implement the search component. So the test, we have 3 test suites. The route param synchronizations with the search change, the URL have to change. When the search change, the second time when the search change, the search in result will have to be updated. And whenever you do the refresh, which means on the first load of the component, it had to take into considerations of the search term that will pass to it, and it will also emit the results back, so that any component user can take the result and render accordingly and not get desynchronized from the URL and from the input and from the component. Okay, so let's see how we're going to demo it. Okay, so for that, in the search box, I add another label just for more accessibility. Anyway, so they have an input with a model, with a placeholder, and we have an ID, and we have the use router, and we have the 2 props here, And we have the new search with receive an items and a default search term and return a search term, the current like reactive search term, and the search result. Okay, and we also have a watch that it will make sure that whenever the search term change, the router will change, and we also emit update items on the search results, new search result value, and we trigger immediately after the component is rendered. This is not the perfect implementation, but for the demo, it's good enough. Okay, so let's go to the component test in using Vitest and Vue Test Utils. So here we will do two test suite. Get the use search term from outside and update the router query param and see it updated on the router and also emitted the event. Okay. To do that, it's pretty, first of all, we need to make sure that we have to mock the router, kind of. So here I just use the same route I defined, but for testing purpose, you can also create a router mocks on the mocks route, and then you create a router mocks for depending on which kind of test you want to do. And then we pass it to the global objects of the mount input parameter, the one of the plugin. And then we also pass the prompt. Okay. So we pass the first search item as the initial value. We expect to find the input with this initial value hello. And we also expect the first emitter, the trigger have to emit the event of the item on the first time, which also means that the total amount of event that it is triggered had to be 1. Okay, so that's the first test. Now comes the second test, which is more interesting. The second test we do exactly the same mountain. Now we want to make sure that when we set the value, okay, the first thing the input have to reflect it. Good. The second thing is the emitter. The emitted event should be 2. We changed it once, and one was immediately triggered after mount, so we have 2 events here. But we cannot test the router because the router is not part of the concept, so it doesn't reflect what the current router's path is. So I haven't found a way to do that here. So if anyone knows, feel free to let me know. So yeah, it's not. You can do it properly, but need to have quite a bit of work around here. So again, unfortunately, we cannot cover fully with unit tests in this case because it's not just unit tests; also update the router and so on, right? Okay, so let's take a look on Playwright. See if Playwright can do anything different. So for Playwright, we also have 2 tests. But before we go on to do with Playwright, we need to make sure that we use the router before we mount any component. So we can have fully experience of the routing changing between pages and the input respond correctly. So again, this is also experimental, and it can be that it's not good enough because here you actually said that for every component in testing, we use the router. May or may not be good enough for us. But anyway, for our demo, that's good enough. So let's go back to our test. So for the search, get search term from outside, it's pretty simple. Again, in Playwright, they don't have the options support for passing props using the options of the mount. Instead, you can pass the prop using JSX, which is just write the function here, the component here, pass the search term, okay, and then pass the search term like this, and it will work, no problem with that. And you can do the locator for the search box, and then can expect the element to have hello, the first value. Pretty straightforward, right? Now let's go to the second test that we couldn't manage in using Vitest. So for the second test, we can locate the search box. We fill the search box. We wait for it to be filled. We assert that the element have the value hello already. And now we use the page which it comes from the input parameter for the function of the test. And the page have the function URL. We get the URL and we check that it contains our search term according to our format. That's it. We just cover our test with routing synchronization in using component testing, but we still can see in the browser reflection. And if we run it now, see, I hope I have time. Which I should be. And oh, wait. Okay. So we can do the yarn test E to E. Okay. And let's hope it will run here, not in. So you can see it will run different. Yep. You look at this, you can see it have no item in cart displayed right here, which we kind of have a bug here of the card and the visual bug. That's pretty much it. And then we also can see the test report right here with all the test. We can see here that everything passed and so on. Okay, that's it for our demo. So conclusion for the test, for the search component test. For Vitest and Test Utils, we don't have visual testing. We can test with actual browser URL. We need to mock the router. For Playwright, we can test the actual URL, actual UI on different browser and device because it's an end-to-end testing framework. So it's offer you the experience of component testing in actually UI view. It can test actual URL synchronizations. As you can see, we can test, we can change the search input. We can see the URL reflected in real time. And still, it needs to initialize the router and the global configurations. It kind of similar to mock router, but it also can be that it's better because if we do the component testing or we do end-to-end testing on the application, maybe we do need router to be initialized for all the view. Okay. So to summarize it, for component testing and for unit test and integrate test, when are we going to use integrate test? Whether the cart or the search for component is suitable for unit test or integrate test. Let's put it this way. We saw that the cart, it really depends on the piece of component. Another component like piece of cart. So it's better to use integration test. And it's also have natural flow be different between components. So yeah, in this case, maybe also on unit test, you maybe not need to repeat it so much. For search component, same thing. It can be that better to do integration test because in unit test, either way, you are already test the unit search test composable. And based on that, which one we're going to choose? For Vitest, well, we're using it if visual test is not required, accessible tests are not required, independent component, no mock, or very minimal mock needed. For Playwright, if you need mock, you shouldn't need mock. We should use visual testing, it requires behavior accessibility testing required, or component that rely on other component external data API to test. And that's it. Lastly, remember the test what component does, not how it does it, and don't overkill it. Thank you for joining my talk. I'm really sorry for taking so long with all the technical issue, but feel free to follow me. And if you have a question, feel free to send me in the chat.
Thank you. And we do have a few questions for you. Do you want to try to see if your camera works for this part, or are you thinking we need to leave it off?
I
Oh, there
just
we go.
click on the mute accidentally. Sorry.
Cool, cool. Yay, we have you back. Okay. For our first question, what's the main advantage of using at Vue/test utils over the testing library /Vue?
Well, I think it's first of all because developed by the Vue team. I've been there. It's very encapsulated for Vue, so I say it's an obvious choice for that. Testing library /Vue also a very good framework, but I think they do have some bugs, especially on Vue implementations. That was my discussion with them 6 months ago, so I hope they fix it. But either way, I will just say Vue Test Utils.
Thank you. Okay. And I are you going to share, or would you please share a code with test examples?
Yes, I will
Maybe
share
that's
that.
something you could share out.
Yeah, I'll share that. Definitely, I will share that on my Twitter also on the chat afterwards. I need to recover for all this technical issue here.
Totally get that. And then what is the plugin that that colors your indentation? It looks very cool and useful.
Oh, I think it's 9.0 monogram. I think I can check it out for you. I got it from, let's see. Let me just do a quick check. I think it's 9.0. Yeah, it's from Sarah Trasner. 9.0 night
Nice.
owl.
Night owl. All right.
Yeah.
And I love that every time I watch a streamer or talks or things like that, I'm always like, what are they using? And it's really cool to be able to see that. In what cases are we should use shallow mount and mount? What cases when should we use shallow mount and mount?
Wow, that's a good question that I don't remember. I just remember that. Okay, shallow mount is probably for lighter way. You don't need all the for everything like the heavy component render and stuff. Um, but yeah, I usually use mount more than shallow mount. I need to look at it again. Oh my god, it feel like I'm in an interview now.
You'll get back to us. No worries. Okay, couple
Yeah,
more
no worries.
questions. Um, how do I know which components to test and which ones not to test?
Yeah, okay, that's simple. The component to test is the component that that have several like a more complex and more state chains. Let's say if you have about 3 different if else, something like that, and there's something like the calculation inside, like local state calculation, you should test the component. But if a component that just render the result of a hooks, like a result of, I'm sorry, a composable, it's just like a card that's random three line of text. So maybe not needed to test the component because what can you go wrong with that? I mean, you will have to test it in end-to-end tests. So it's better to do a whole full scale end-to-end test for such a component.
Great, thank you. And last question can you give us a couple book recommendations for testing UI components? By the way, how many chapters are in your own Vue book on testing?
Well, I would love to have like 2 or 3 chapters on that on my book, but my editor say no. You are learning Vue, you're not learning testing, so no. So I have about one and a half. Like I cover one chapter that I cover fully about testing, including
Does this
unit
mean that
testing.
there's going to be a future book on testing?
Uh, well, I thought of it. I'm just not that good at building the testing system, so I probably have to learn a bit more and before I can go to a whole separate book. A book for recommendation for testing UI. there's a lot. There's quite a lot of good books. I'll give I'll send in the chat because it's hard for me to remember now which book I can give you. I usually also go to Browser Stack. Browser Stack is not about books, but it's the website. It's a company that do browser, like I'll say a the driver for testing, environment for testing in browser, and it does have a very good blog. Like it give you a lot of information, a lot of testing and methodologies, and a lot of tutorial and insight about how to test correctly. So yeah, it's a recommend first source for testing if you want to know more about different technique and what you should test and what you shouldn't test.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Maya. We greatly appreciate you joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you.